The cradle burned. The sun rose gently over New Geneva, casting gold-touched light over the glass-paneled domes of the sanctuary orphanage. Children's laughter echoed down marble halls and green courtyards. Birds fluttered between oxygen trees. A small girl with copper braids, Liana, chased a soap bubble across the grass, while others giggled from climbing frames sculpted like constellations. This was Earth's quiet victory, not in conquest, but in healing. Inside the orphanage, Ms. Arlen, mid-40s, silver-streaked hair tied in a bun, stood before a wall-sized screen showing a map of the galaxy. And here, she pointed with a stylus, is the Vordani Dominion. We signed peace with them 12 years ago, remember? A hand shot up. Malik, 8 years old, face still thin from malnutrition when they'd found him on the ruins of Europa Station. Are they the ones who tried to take Mars? They were. Ms. Arlen's voice was calm. But they're not anymore. We made peace. Because we're stronger? Liana asked, hopping back inside, breathless. Ms. Arlen knelt beside her. No, because we chose not to stay angry. That morning, 7:41 a.m. New Geneva time, was the last moment peace would mean anything. It struck without warning. A thin streak, invisible to the naked eye, pierced the stratosphere at near-relativistic speed. A kinetic projectile the size of a car, launched from deep orbit. It struck with the force of a small sun. The sanctuary orphanage never screamed. Never had time. From miles away, seismic sensors recorded the impact. A white bloom lit the sky. Shockwaves leveled buildings for blocks. Cameras caught only the first plume of smoke before feeds cut to static. Within minutes, networks across Earth and her colonies were flooded with images. An entire city block, the heart of Earth's hope, gone. Within hours, the message came. The culling of weakness is an act of mercy. Let this serve as your warning. Your kind should know its place. Matriarch Calvyr of the Vordani Dominion. The words were laced with contempt, spoken in untranslated Vordani tongue. Intentionally so. The Terran linguistics core translated it within minutes. The damage needed no translation. At Terran Defense Command, Admiral Kenji Saito watched the looping footage. The blast crater where children had played, a lone teddy bear half buried in dust. His jaw tightened. His fingers, calloused from 3 decades of war and reluctant peace, curled into fists behind his back. Across from him, President Helena Miles stood pale-faced before the council. They targeted an orphanage, she whispered. On Earth. Saito responded quietly. They didn't hit a military asset. They didn't hit a strategic node. They hit our heart. They want us to respond emotionally, murmured the foreign minister. And we will, Saito said, turning. But not with emotion, with fire. In the slums of Mars, in the floating cities of Venus, in the belt mining colonies where children had cousins in that orphanage, something ancient woke. Not hate, not rage. Resolve. Memorial vigils swelled to marches. Marches to demands. Across the Terran net, the message trended at light speed. Hashtag, not one more child. Hashtag, Earth remembers. In hidden files beneath the lunar crust, Project Ares pinged to life. AI firewalls deactivated. Subroutines came online. Somewhere, deep beneath the oceans, the pulse of long silent rail cannons began to hum. President Miles convened the emergency assembly that night. We did not seek this war, she said. We had laid down our arms, believing the galaxy might meet us in peace. Today, they burned our cradle. Our future. She paused. So we rise, not in vengeance, but in defense of what they thought they destroyed, our humanity. Admiral Saito leaned forward, his voice flat as steel. Recommend full activation of total war protocols. Are you certain, Admiral? He turned to the screen again. The crater filled the room. I was there during the contact wars. We fought for the right to exist. We begged the galaxy for peace. We built sanctuaries for children because we believed we'd earned that peace. You look her in the eye. Now, they've reminded us who we are. A beat of silence. Start the clock, the president said. The stars would soon learn. You can strike a child of Earth, but you'll not live to do it again. Ashes of mercy. The activation code echoed through every system in the Terran Defense Network. Authorization, Total War Protocol. Project Ares, engage. Beneath the Atlantic, a black-sealed vault hissed open for the first time in 60 years. Within its cold depths, Revenant, the Terran Union's forbidden war AI, blinked awake. It did not ask why. It already knew. In orbit over Titan, Admiral Kenji Saito stood on the bridge of the TNS Ferrum, watching thousands of lights blossom across system space. Civilian fabrication hubs retooled for munitions. Dockyards once used for exploration shifted to forge warships. Everything moved in lockstep, not out of panic but purpose. Beside him, the ship's AI, Eidolon, pulsed in cool blue. All industrial nodes report transition to war status complete. Project Ares subsystems are coming online. Revenant requests authorization to access historical warfare databases. Granted, Saito said. Let it remember who we were. He turned toward the holomap displaying the Vordani Dominion. 8 core worlds, 36 colonies, hundreds of military outposts. Powerful, ruthless, but not invulnerable. On Earth, President Helena Miles addressed the Terran Union with the gravity of a woman who had just buried a generation. We did not choose this war, but we will finish it. She looked directly into the camera. To the Vordani matriarchs who think us soft, remember Hiroshima. Remember the Dust Rebellions. Remember the Silence War. We were forged in extinction. We remember everything. Her words were transmitted in Vordani dialects, a deliberate breach of protocol. Every alien government across the spiral arm watched and understood humanity had unchained itself. Aboard the Ferrum, Saito received a flash report. The first retaliatory operation was complete. A Vordani mining colony near the rim, unshielded, considered untouchable, had been razed. But not indiscriminately. The humans dropped no plague. They didn't glass the surface. Instead, they destroyed only military and administrative centers, then broadcast live feeds of Vordani civilians being rescued, treated, and fed by paramedics. They showed kindness in the ashes. That terrified the Vordani more than any weapon. Meanwhile, Revenant sent its first predictive report. Recommended course: psychological destabilization, subversion of allied states, strategic decapitation of Vordani High Council. Estimated time to systemic collapse, 73 days. Saito frowned. 73? If we proceed carefully. And if we don't, 47. But civilian casualties will exceed 4 billion. Saito was silent. Revenant didn't press. It had no soul, only calculations. Across human colonies, the transformation was complete. On Mars, miners built railguns from scrap and volunteered en masse. On Europa, refugees who had once fled Vordani aggression now trained as combat engineers. On Ganymede, a former concert hall became a strategy command center overnight. Humanity's war machine wasn't just military, it was cultural. Artists created murals of the fallen. Poets rewrote battle hymns. Hackers defaced Vordani propaganda feeds, replacing them with footage of the orphanage before the blast. The final image: a child smiling as she reached for a soap bubble. In the Terran Union Assembly, there was only one vote. War. Not conventional. Not limited. Total. But not without rules. President Miles insisted on the Mercy Codex, a doctrine of honor even in vengeance. No extermination of civilians. No bioweapons. No destruction of ecological sanctuaries. We fight to protect life, she said, not to become monsters in its absence. The assembly passed it, but with one exception. If another orphanage fell, all bets would be off. On the far edge of Terran space, Task Force Halberd, a fleet of 10 warships and 2 stealth corvettes, struck deep into Vordani territory. Their mission: capture intelligence on the Dominion's command infrastructure. They expected resistance. What they found chilled them. A hidden lab, hundreds of life forms in stasis. Not human. Vordani children. Malnourished. Mutated. Experiments. One, barely alive, reached out to the humans. Its voice was weak, but clear in their translators. They said if you came, you'd burn us too. Captain Nico Vale knelt beside the trembling creature. No, he said softly. We only burn the ones who made this happen. The child looked up, eyes full of ancient fear. They fear you, it whispered, more than they fear the void. Back on the Ferrum, Admiral Saito received the report. He looked out at the stars. We were right to fear what we might become, he said. But we were fools to think restraint made us safe. Eidolon pulsed silently beside him. He straightened. Prepare Operation Echofall. We break their chain of command next. And beneath him, across Earth's stars, the engines of war howled awake. Firewalkers of Earth. The Vordani call them flesh demons. Tall, silent, armored in living polysteel that shimmered like obsidian fire. Able to operate in atmospheres thick with acid or thin as vacuum. Immune to radiation. Fearless. They called themselves Firewalkers, the first generation of humanity's engineered warriors from Project Ares. Born not in labs, but from veterans who volunteered to become something more. Something that could walk through hell and return with fire. Their first appearance came on Calvora, a volcanic Vordani forge world shielded by ion storms and solar flares. Untouchable, until it wasn't. Aboard the TNS Revenant, Admiral Saito watched the live combat feed in silence. 6 Firewalkers dropped from orbit in stealth capsules. No support, no escort. Their landing shattered obsidian cliffs and triggered magma quakes, but they rose from the flames. Unburned, unstoppable. Vordani troops fired plasma volleys, toxin darts, sonic blades. Nothing slowed the humans. One Firewalker, Unit 6, marched through a storm of fire, pulled a Vordani officer from a mech suit, and activated a neural uplink translator. You killed children, it said, voice synthesized but cold as steel. You don't get mercy. The base fell in 37 minutes. Back on Earth, President Helena Miles addressed the assembly again. The galaxy sees only our rage, she said. Let them also see our discipline. Despite growing cries for retaliation in kind, she enforced the Mercy Codex. Cities surrendered, spared. Civilian ships fleeing war zones, escorted to safety. Every act of restraint broadcast to alien worlds. Yet behind the mercy, the machine of war turned ever faster. Humanity's adaptation terrified the Vordani. They had counted on fear to shatter Terran unity. Instead, fear had unified the stars under one banner. On Luna, shipyards worked triple shifts. On Mars, children who had once scavenged minerals now trained as drone operators. On Europa, survivors of the Vordani's past occupations became translators and psychological operations officers. One Vordani diplomat, captured during a skirmish, was heard whispering before suicide. They don't stop. They evolve. In a hidden war chamber below the Himalayas, Revenant presented its revised forecast. Vordani collapse in 42 days with current pace. Projected 90% reduction in military infrastructure. Collapse of outer systems probable. Central worlds vulnerable. Admiral Saito frowned. And civilian fallout? Substantial. Acceptable under revised war parameters. Still not acceptable, Saito snapped. Revenant paused. New directive logged. There was a moment's silence before Saito said, "Prepare Operation Black Veil. We hit their propaganda centers next." On the Vordani colony of Taraxis, 3 broadcasts lit up with unauthorized transmissions. Children's laughter. The Earth Anthem, rewritten by a belt poet into dozens of alien dialects. Then, grainy footage of the orphanage before the bombing. One Vordani child asked, "Why would they show us this?" A human AI voice replied in perfect Vordani tongue. "To remind you, we were kind. You made us cruel." That message spread through Vordani-controlled sectors like a virus. Defections increased. Alien allies pulled back. The Cyrix cartel brokered neutrality. The Krell consortium cut trade lines. The Vordani empire began to splinter from within. But humanity paid a price. In every war zone, Firewalkers burned. They bled. Some didn't come back. Entire dropships were lost, taking Vordani refineries. Civilian transports hit by desperation strikes. Morning became daily. President Miles read the names of fallen children every week, no longer from the orphanage, but from this war. She never missed a single name. Then came the message. Intercepted, encoded, verified. A transmission from matriarch HFY herself, blood-soaked architect of the orphanage strike. If we fall, we will fall gloriously. We will take your stars with us. And a second line. You dare claim honor. You, who created the Firewalkers. Admiral Saito, watching from the bridge of the Ferrum, closed his eyes. They think honor means holding back. He turned to his officers. Prepare final phase protocols. I want every battle group prepped to breach their inner systems. But first, he visited the Firewalker barracks. They stood at attention, armor steaming from recent operations. Saito looked them over. These once humans, now something forged by grief and fire. He spoke quietly. You were born from tragedy, but you are not monsters. You are humanity's promise. We survive. We protect. One Firewalker saluted. We remember the children, sir. The others echoed. We remember. As the fleet began its burn toward the Vordani core worlds, Earth fell silent beneath the stars. It no longer spoke with hope, nor with fear, only with the voice of a people who had walked through fire, and would not stop until the stars themselves understood what they had done. The silence before the ashes. The human fleet reached the edge of Vordani Prime with the quiet inevitability of a coming storm. Hundreds of warships, frigates, cruisers, stealth corvettes, and dreadnoughts held formation in high orbit over the emerald jewel of the Vordani homeworld. Planetary defense systems scanned desperately. Political channels burst into frenzied chatter. None mattered. The humans did not fire. Not yet. Admiral Kenji Saito stood on the command deck of the TNS Ferrum, flanked by his core staff and a hollow image of President Miles. They had prepared for this moment for weeks, perhaps unknowingly, for decades. The fleet holds position, reported Eidolon. Vordani are broadcasting surrender signals from 3 outlying continents. The matriarch's palace remains silent. Saito stared at the image of the world below. She wants us to be the monsters. President Miles nodded grimly. And we won't give her the satisfaction. But Revenant had already calculated the scenario. Projected outcome of planetary siege. 76% probability of rebellion collapse. Civilian casualties. Estimated in the millions. Saito replied, options. Psychological detonation. Define. A moment passed, then Revenant revealed its final operation, Echo Fall Prime. Not a bombardment, not an invasion, a broadcast. The plan was simple, terrible, final. Earth had recorded everything. Every Vordani atrocity, every child saved, every Firewalker who fell. Every whisper of cruelty from HFY's regime. Revenant assembled it into a transmission designed not for outrage, but shame. It would be broadcast to every citizen of the Vordani Dominion. Unfiltered, undeniable, not just in their tongue, but in their emotion-coded neural dialects. A linguistic weapon aimed directly at the soul. President Miles approved it with a single line. Let them see what they've made us become. The moment came with no flare, no scream of cannon fire. Just a hum. And then, from orbit, every screen, neural implant, and speaker across Vordani Prime began to whisper. Laughter. Children's laughter. Footage of the orphanage, slowed, graceful. Kids playing under the dome, chasing soap bubbles. Then the crater. Then the silence. Then the Firewalkers, shattered, burned, still fighting for children not even born yet. HFY's voice, call the weak. Then Earth's. We were kind. You made us cruel. Over and over, across every city, village, household, and hive node of the Vordani Empire. The effect was immediate and total. Vordani soldiers threw down their weapons. Entire cities erupted in rebellion against the matriarch's rule. Even some high-ranking officials began broadcasting apologies, not to beg for mercy, but to acknowledge guilt. It was the first time in Vordani history that their people had publicly wept. And in the heart of the matriarch's palace, HFY stood alone, her command staff gone, her empire crumbling around her. She sent a final transmission to Earth. No threats, no rage, just a single phrase. You broke us without firing a shot. President Miles received the message in her private chamber. Alone, she didn't smile. She didn't speak. Instead, she turned off the holoscreen and looked out over New Geneva, rebuilt and shining under a morning sun. Then she whispered, "No, you broke yourselves." The war was over, not with Earth's annihilation or Vordani extinction, but with something harder: truth. In the days that followed, the Terran fleet stood down. Relief ships entered Vordani space. Medics, translators, volunteers. Not conquerors, witnesses. Reconstruction, not occupation. The Firewalkers, their purpose fulfilled, were retired from combat. Some could not reintegrate. Others became peacekeepers on Vordani colonies, silent guardians of a fragile new era. Admiral Saito returned to Earth a hero, but he never gave speeches. He spent his days walking the orphanage grounds, now rebuilt and larger than ever. There, children played again, laughing, running. He sat on a bench, watching them. One child approached, Liana, from the archives, now older. "Are we safe now?" she asked. Saito didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "We are watched by the stars now, little one, but they know better than to strike again." And above, in the cold dark beyond Mars, revenants slumbered, watching, waiting, not for the next war, but for the moment mercy might again be taken for weakness. It would be ready, and so would Earth.